I don't think there's anything more to say about who I am. I'm Tom Hoyland, I work at Sky Betting and Gaming, and I'm an Agile coach. And tonight I'm going to talk to you about how, over the last 18 months, we've been building what we consider to be a high-performing Agile team. To do that, I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to talk to you about how we put this team together, the tools and techniques that we used, the metrics that we followed, and the lessons that we learned along the way. But usually when I do these talks, they're quite academic and theoretical, but everything I'm going to show you here tonight is real. It involves real people, it's about real interactions, and the order in which you see it here is the order in which it happened. So I hope you enjoy it. If you've got any questions, please stick around till the end. I'll make sure I do, so I can answer as many questions as possible. Okay? So let's set this up then. Once upon a time, there was the world of Sky Betting and Gaming. And if you look at Sky Betting and Gaming, we are quite a big company. So we've got a lot of brands, and you probably are aware of our brands. You might have heard of Jeff's Millions, Super 6, Fantasy Football, Vegas, Bonus Time, those things. Well, in order to remain nimble and agile and keep delivering, what we need to do is we need to organise ourselves in a certain way. And at Sky Betting and Gaming, we've chosen to organise ourselves around the Spotify model. Now, that is to say that we've got a lot of small independent, multidiscipline teams, and we call these squads. And these squads come together to form bigger alliances, and these bigger alliances are called tribes. Now, the two biggest tribes that we've got at Sky Betting and Gaming are bet and gaming. And usually when we go out and we start on the tours to the conferences and to the meetups, we often talk about these two. But there are lots of other tribes that exist, and these are two of the other tribes. We've got core, and then we've got data. Data is all about understanding our customers. It's about understanding what drives them, what motivates them, understanding how they use our products, so we can use that information to build more intuitive, more immersive product experiences. And we also use that information to support safer gambling, because that's something we're incredibly passionate about. Then we've got core. Core provide the foundations of Sky Betting and Gaming. We're often overlooked, but these provide the foundations and the fundamentals of a 21st century digital entertainment business. And that's where we're going to be setting tonight's story, because that's the tribe that I joined about 18 months ago. Now, when I joined Core a long, long time ago, it was structured very differently to as it is now. If you were to try to work out, hang on, are there some kind of like squads in Core? You couldn't really see them. There were kind of like two squads, but they were really big and really amorphous. And if you were to identify them, they were kind of split into two. We had a front-end squad and we had a back-end squad. And every couple of weeks we would come together to integrate the work that we'd done so we could ship that out of the door to our customers. And that worked well, but we wanted to become more nimble, we wanted to become more agile. So what we decided to do was to restructure around our customers, their domain and the services that we offered. So we split up into 5 different squads. These are the squads that we created. Platform is our site reliability engineering function. This is all about making sure that our services can scale to meet some massive demands and volumes. And when I'm talking about massive demands and volumes, I'm talking about big events, things like Cheltenham, Grand National Festival and Boxing Day, where we see some absolutely astronomical numbers coming through our doors. It's also about reliability, so keeping things reliable. Then we've got payments. Payments do exactly what it suggests on the tin. It's about taking payments safely and securely from our customers, allowing them to deposit and then allowing them to withdraw their money. Safer Gambling is the team that takes the information and the data that we got from our data tribe and works hand in glove with them to be able to deliver those insights, but then also look after our customers, to nudge them in the right direction and to prevent them from developing gambling habits and problem gambling behaviours. It's really important to us, so much so that we've got a squad that's focused on that. And then we've got verification. Again, it's about understanding who our customers are. Are they who they say they are? Are they entitled to be able to use our services? So that team is all about understanding who they are. Now, to get people in the door for the first time, we've got this squad in the middle. It's called the Login and Registration Squad. Again, exactly what it says on the tin. And this is the squad that I joined 18 months ago. But login and registration, that's a mouthful, isn't it? And I'm not going to keep saying that all tonight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you to the acronym, and I'm going to introduce you to the character, our main character for tonight's talk. And I'd like to introduce you to Lars. So I'd like you to meet Lars. Lars stands for the Login and Registration Squad. And when we went through our reorganisation, 12 people came together for the first time. Some people knew each other before, some people were great engineering veterans, we had some great product people, some great business analysts, and then we had people straight out of university with loads of enthusiasm. Okay? When we came together as a squad though, we needed to work out what we wanted to be. A lot of things had changed in the organisation, so we decided to have a squad inception to work out what are our goals and our aspirations. And we came up with 3 goals. We said this: we want to be the best login squad thingy ever. Okay? We wanted to deliver a really good experience to our customers. but we'd only just been informed, so we needed to understand what that experience was all about. Now, we wanted to be able to take concepts and to turn them into reality really quickly. We wanted to be able to sense a need and to be able to respond to that really quickly. So we wanted to be the most agile squad that we could possibly be. And we'd heard about this thing called DevOps. We'd seen a lot of job adverts for DevOps. So we said naturally that we wanted to be maximum DevOp. And that's not a typo. We just didn't really understand what DevOps was all about. So we set ourselves these lofty goals, and all of this change had taken place over a couple of weeks. All of the departments had moved around. What did we decide to do next? We decided to do one thing, and that one thing was to do nothing. So for a couple of weeks, we let the dust settle. But in the background, we weren't doing nothing. We were doing something. We were observing and reporting to understand how people were starting to work together. Because a lot of people had come together for the first time. So we wanted to understand how those people were interacting. What was the quality of the conversation? What relationships were forming? What interactions were going off? We also wanted to understand what was the technology doing for us. Was our technology setting us free, or was it constraining us? How did our pipelines operate? So we started to understand where we were, and we wanted to baseline us as a team so we knew where we were and where we wanted to get to. We also wanted to understand our maturity too. Now, when we talk about maturity and accelerating teams and growing a team in terms of maturity, we often talk about using things like frameworks and patterns. And when I say frameworks and patterns, I mean things like Scrum, okay? Even SAFe is a framework or a pattern. I know that divides a lot of people in the Agile community. And then we've got Kanban, and we've even got IT service management, frameworks, patterns that are really useful. And the reason why we use frameworks and patterns is because what that does is it brings loads of information to the surface. It takes information that we've got, intellect, it takes lessons learned from one context, it makes it portable, and it allows us to move it to the next context. And we can choose to use them, or we can choose to throw them away. It's up to us, it's our choice. Now, the frameworks that I've mentioned before are very product-oriented, they're very service, they're very project-oriented. But what we want to do here is we want to build a high-performing DevOps team, a high-performing Agile team. And in the DevOps space, frameworks exist there. And one of the most popular frameworks is CALMS. Has anybody heard of CALMS? Quick show of hands. So a couple of people have heard of CALMS. So very quickly, in a nutshell, CALMS originates back in probably around 2010 in probably one of the first DevOps Days events that took place. And it's a really good framework for understanding where a team is in terms of its DevOps maturity. And it's made up of 5 main pillars. And the goal of CALMS is to improve the capability of a team and to build a DevOps mindset, a self-managing, high-performing teams that merges together product and development and operations all into one whole. And they came up with these five different kind of like headings. And they're really, really important. And we started to follow these. We started to understand what they're all about. So the first part of CALMS is having a strong culture, because it's a strong culture that knits people together, that allows a team to grow and expand and scale, and it allows it to contract. It allows it to deal with difficult situations. It enables people to move together with a single goal in lockstep to where they're wanting to get to. A strong culture is absolutely essential if we want to create teams that are not brittle. Automation is also important too. There's no point doing things manually if we can automate it, because we can take that time, that investment, and that intellect, and we can throw it somewhere else. It's something that's far more valuable for us. Then we've got lean ways of working. Usually when we come into teams and we want to optimize a team for the first time, what we tend to do is we tend to focus in on that team through reductionism, to try to optimize that team to get the most out of them. But often a team is just one part of a delivery pipeline. It's one part of a value chain. So in CALMS, we look at the whole lean value chain, lean systems thinking, and we say, actually, if we want to optimize the overall outcome for our customers and our users, we need to look at things from the whole value chain. And if things are adding value, directly and indirectly, great. If they're not, we need to question them really fundamentally. Then we've got metrics. Metrics and monitoring are an absolute essential, because there's no point making changes, trying to make improvements, if we're not monitoring the outcomes of that. We want to move towards evidence-based working and evidence-based decision-making. And when I talk about metrics and monitoring, I'm not just talking about the health endpoints, the services that we're creating, whether they're up or they're down. I'm talking about our decisions, our business decisions that we're making. And then finally, at the bottom, we've got collaboration and sharing. If we want to build a high-performing DevOps team, a high-performing Agile team, what we've got to do is we've got to be able to collaborate and share. We've got to diffuse knowledge from one person to another. We want to create high-performing teams. We want to create T-shaped teams that can keep delivering regardless of whether they grow and they scale or they start to contract and shrink. So these are the different parts of comms that we started to look into. But rather than jumping in with culture, we decided to baseline everything we were doing in the team when we started to work with them for the first time. And the first thing we went after was metrics, and we started to collect telemetry. And we collected all the usual telemetry, all the things that you would usually expect. So we got our health endpoints, the number of pull requests that were going on, the number of commits, the mergers, all of those usual things. But then we decided to expand that out, not just to the technology and the code we were cutting, but also to our pipeline, the things that were moving through that pipeline, our thought process. Everything that was involved in delivery, we started to measure it. And when I say everything, I mean absolutely everything. We started to measure complexity. We looked at the health and values of the team, the number of incidents that were traveling through the pipeline. We're an organization that cares about finances, so we wanted to see the CapEx, OpEx balance between the work that we were doing. So we started to capture everything. But we decided to do one weird thing, and that one weird thing was to hide all of that from the team and not reveal any of it to the team. So why would we do that? If we want to be a high-performing Agile team, we want to be the best Agile team that we can be, surely we care about things like empiricism, transparency, inspection, adaptation. Why would we hide it? Well, we know that when we are being observed, we naturally start to change our behaviour. It's called the observer effect. It's also called the Hawthorne effect. Okay? And we start to change our behaviour. But metrics are really interesting because they drive behavioural changes even more strongly than being observed, because if you know that you're being monitored with something, if you know there's a metric there, you are going to consciously or unconsciously start to nudge towards that metric. Now, some of those metrics are really useful. They take us in the right direction. They help us achieve our goals and our outcomes in the long term. But then some of those metrics are vanity metrics. They lead to really perverse behaviour, not helpful behaviours. So what we decided to do was to hide these metrics from our team at first, but then little by little start to reveal them to the team to allow them to decide whether those metrics are useful or they're not. Are they taking us in the right direction, or are they breeding behaviours that are actually quite damaging to getting towards that end goal? So we started to hide them. Well, we hid them at first, but then we started to reveal them. So those are the metrics we started to capture, and we started to drip them out bit by bit because we didn't want to change how the team was behaving. We didn't want to disturb their natural habitat. So metrics were being captured, but we wanted to be the most agile squad. But we know to be the most agile squad and to be a good agile squad, you should not be afraid to go back to basics and look at what's working and what's not working. And we started to look at what the foundation of an agile squad is. And the foundation of a good agile squad is visibility of a product backlog, a single place where we can start to work from. But we didn't have that. So we started to assemble a product backlog. We started to look at the work that was taking place now. We looked at what had just travelled through the board. We looked at what was coming up next. And we started to pull this backlog together. We looked at the different workflows that things went through, and everything kind of went through the same kind of sequence of events before it went from concept and turned into reality. But then what we found was that nearly all of our different ticket types, all the different types of things that we were trading in, they all behaved in the same way, except for one thing. So we had features, we had changes, we had bugs, we had enhancements, we had defects, you name it, we had all the usual types of things that float around. And we use Jira. 8 out of 10 cats prefer to use Jira. It's all right, it's okay. That's the software that we use. But one of the things we found was really interesting because features behave differently from everything else. Some features behave normally. Another type of feature didn't behave normally. The type of feature that behaved normally, you could see coming into existence. You could see this feature being created by our product owner and our business analysts. And it was a really embryonic idea, a really small seed of an idea, but that idea would grow, it would become bigger, it would become more mature. Information would be added, things would be taken away. But once it reached that certain level of maturity, it would land on almost the delivery part of our pipeline's doorstep. It would be taken through and converted into reality. Everything was good. But what you could see was a thought process taking place. You could see ideation. Then what we found was there was a different type of feature. These other features had none of that ideation, they had none of that history, they had none of the legacy. What happened was they just appeared from a puff of smoke, and yet they landed on the delivery doorstep and we worked them like anything else. But what this meant to us was that actually maybe this ideation is taking place somewhere else. Maybe we've got multiple ingress points to our delivery pipeline. Maybe we've got multiple product backlogs. And we know we don't want multiple product backlogs because it's a bad thing. So what we decided to do was to go on a product backlog hunt, and we started to look around the organisation, and we found loads of backlogs. We found them in Jira, in Excel, in Trello, on walls. We also found not just backlogs based on the location, we found backlogs based on the profession as well. We had dev backlogs. We have UX backlogs, program backlogs, and retros. ideas from retros that were just being stored somewhere. Pro tip, if you want to find the UX backlogs, they're usually on post-it notes. So, we also had stuff like this as well. We had backlogs coming from Confluence, and that's where everything goes to die. So what we decided to do was we decided to pull everything together into one single backlog, and this took around 2 weeks to do. It was really quite difficult and quite painful. But the size of our backlog over that 2-week period jumped up by about 130%, which is quite a jump. Now, can you imagine how our product owner reacted to that? Absolutely. Actually, what they meant was, which thing first? It took a while. The challenge that we had, though, was that for the first time ever, our product backlog was in one place. Initially, when presented with that, we had the initial reaction of, oh my God, there's so much work going on. But the hard reality was that work was always going on. It was just hidden and distributed elsewhere. Now it's in one place, now we can do something about it, which is a good place to get to. What we also did by bringing it into one place was we changed the nature of who owned that product backlog. Previously, the ownership of the product backlog was very much with that product owner, but people weren't invested in it. Now it's got the UX stuff in there, now it's got the dev stuff in there, now it's got program, it's got everybody's contributions in there. The nature and ownership of that backlog changed. It was more about, okay, what can we do together as a team? The quality of the conversation improved. Why? Because software engineers, UX people, the people that are working on this backlog are far more inclined to go and canvass their opinions and, say, this is the thing that we should be doing next. Have conversations with our product owners. It increased the amount of engagement that we got, which was absolutely fantastic. So it improved the quality of our overall conversation and it moved us in the right direction. And it also enabled us to work out what is the most important thing for us to do next. What's the highest priority? But the problem there is I'm using the wrong word, because priority is not the word we should be looking for, because the things at the top of that product backlog, when executed, those are the things that should deliver the maximum business value, not priority, the biggest bang for buck. But back then we were not at a stage where we could talk about value. We were not mature enough as a team. We had to go on a journey. So I'll be revisiting and refactoring this later in today's talk. So this is all about going back to basics: transparency, inspection, adaptation, getting everything in one place. Then what we decided to do is we decided to take that same approach of going back to basics and apply it to people as well. So we started to look at the people that were coming into our team, because we brought 12 people together. And these 12 people were great, but the way that we tracked these 12 people was very mechanically, very component-based. We almost assumed that when you bring these people together, you've got one person with 10 years of Agile experience, another person with 10 years of Agile experience. And when you mash them together, that means a combined 20 years of Agile experience. It doesn't work that way. People are not machines. They cannot be aggregated that way. Experience doesn't work that way. And we found that the physics broke down, because when all these people came together, even though we had experience, we were all talking a different language. We were using words like complexity, velocity, throughput. All of these things we were using, but we were actually talking a separate language because we had different backgrounds, different belief systems, different understandings of what these things mean. Everybody's got a different context. So we found we had quite a challenge here. And then what we also found is that when we came into the room, when we came to join this team, we didn't just come alone. We didn't just bring ourselves, but we also brought our trainers and our instructors and the most influential people in our careers into that room. Because I don't know about you folks, but I'm on social media, I follow some pretty influential people, and they influence me and how I see the world. And we go on these training courses, we meet instructors and teachers, and they have a lasting impact on us. They become our gurus, okay? And we bring our gurus into relationships. We become their ambassadors. But what we found with our team is that we had this thing called guru competition, where people were in the room saying that my guru is more effective than your guru. I'm seeing a lot of laughs here. It rings a bell? Yeah? Okay. So how do we get past this then? Well, what we decided to do was to start these things called Agile boot camps and take everybody back to zero. And the goal with the Agile boot camps was to reinstill Agile values in people, to get everybody to start again, but more importantly, to start again together. So we created these one-day immersive events where we get everybody in the same room. And they are long events, and we go back to basics. We look at Agile values and the Agile manifesto, and we quickly do away with that. And then we start to look at things like extreme programming techniques, okay? Collective code ownership, collective decision making, paired working, how does that work? We look at how to slice work to get towards continuous delivery. How do you slice work based on user story mapping, impact mapping? How can we make things smaller? And then we also look at the more avant-garde things like innovation accounting, okay? Validated learning, the whole lean UX thought process, lean startup. And we also talk about things like the mathematics. So we look at things like queuing theory, Little's law, and we go into things like psychological safety, because psychological safety is absolutely essential to building a high-performing team. You need that safety net to be able to express yourself. So the reason we did this is that we're using it as a vehicle to allow our team members to work out what version or what techniques within Agile are the most useful to them. And what they did was they took those things, those tools and techniques, and they worked out which were valuable to them in their context. They effectively designed their own version of Agile that was relevant to them, which was really good. So we started to get alignment about the things that we cared about. The next thing we did is we worked on these things called rules and values. Now, I spent a lot of time working with teams building psychological safety and building what I call high-performing teams. And the best and the highest performing teams all have this psychological safety element where people can express themselves, they can talk about ideas, they can talk about risks, they can talk about concerns without the fear of them being challenged, without reprisals, which is absolutely essential. So what we did is we found a way to bootstrap that and accelerate it, and we did it using rules and values. So rules are the hard red lines that a team have. These are the non-negotiables, the things that are always in place. It's okay, something's going to happen. These are the non-negotiables. They are the red lines. Okay, so these are our rules, and we set up these rules as a team, and we said that our team is going to be open and honest. We're going to respect each other. We're going to do a good job first time, and the pipeline is everybody's problem. And these became our rules. And when you cross these rules, there's going to be a price. And for us, the price is cake on a Monday, preferably. Okay, these are the non-negotiables. Then we said, okay, well, what are values then? Well, values, if rules are binary and they're on or they're off, well, values are analog. You can turn them from 1 all the way up to 11, but they're always there in the background. And these are the way that we interact with each other. These are the things that we care about. We can change them based on the context and the setting in which we're working. So these are things like pairing up. You can't pair up on everything, okay? Sometimes you don't have time to transfer knowledge from one person to another based on the situation that you're being presented with. Sometimes you just can't maintain focus. But these are the things that we care about. And we use these as the foundations to create our team. We started to talk about them. We started to reinforce them. We started to use them during stand-ups, during retrospectives, asking questions around them, just across conversations across the office. And what these things did was they started to build this trust between the team. We actually started to build an identity based on this way of working. And this became the seed of our psychological safety within the team. The team knew what to expect, and people also knew what to expect when working with our team. This is our way of working after all. So we started to talk about it, not just covertly, but more overtly. And we started to advertise it, and we started to say that this is how we work. And naturally we gave people a flag. But it's really important to give people a flag, because when you give somebody a flag, it gives them an identity. It makes them feel different. It makes them feel special. It unites people. It's incredibly important and incredibly powerful when you give somebody a name or you give somebody a flag. So this is about us building a culture. This is about us building a culture and holding people together. It's about creating an anti-brittle pattern for an organisation, something that we're keen to do. This all sounds fantastic. It sounds very ethereal. It sounds very bohemian, and the team loved it. But at the same time, we've got to keep delivering something. So whilst we were doing all of this, people came back to me and said, Tom, that's lovely, now get delivering. Because a couple of weeks had passed and nobody had seen anything. 2018, though, was a massive year for us. So we had loads going off. We had self-regulation that we were working on. We had GDPR, okay? We had a massive football event in Russia, something called the World Cup, to deal with. So all of these things were taking place. So people started to wonder, what's going on? We need to start delivering. We need to start responding to this change, because people, regardless of the industry that you're in, whether it's building hard products, it's building soft products, whether it's agile or it's something else, people still care about time to market. They want to know how long it's going to take, because they want to be able to make a time-based decision and an investment. Time to market, time to impact, how long is it going to take? And we need to be able to answer these questions pretty quickly. So we decided to take a leaf out of Donald Trump's book, and we decided to make Agile boring again. And we did that by zooming in on everything that was going on understanding it at a microscopic level, because we wanted to understand the physics of what was happening. How are people interacting with each other? How was the work being worked? We wanted to understand it at its most molecular level. And this is what we found. So we zoomed into the work, and we found that our work kind of fit into one of two categories, and these are just names that we gave to things. The first one was commodities, the second one was bespoke. we found that one type of work lived in what we called existing domains. Existing domains, when I'm talking about domains, I'm talking about domain-driven design. Bounded context, ubiquitous language. So I'm working in an area that I know, something like the login and the registration service. And this is an existing domain, and it's built using known technologies that we're already aware of, and we understand how they work. There's not a lot more to be investigated. We understand the interrelationships between them. We understand the physics of what's going on. Then we've got bespoke work. Bespoke work is just like commodities. The only difference is it's new domains. Domains that we haven't yet gone into, domains that we're developing, like self-regulation or let's say self-exclusion of gaming customers. Or it might be a domain that we're acquiring from another team and we're taking ownership of it for the first time, so we started to learn about it again. And these different types of domains are coupled with new and existing technologies. If you wanted to, you could map this to Cynefin. So you could usually say that commodities usually live within the known domain, maybe complex, maybe complicated, whereas stuff in bespoke definitely lives in the complex area of Cynefin. So what we started to do was understand these different domains and understand whether they became saturated, what were the physics and what were the rules that existed. And we found that these domains, regardless of the technology, became crowded. You could only throw so many people at these domains before everything started to fall apart. And when I say fall apart, I mean the physics of delivery. You can only do so much before people start to fall over each other. You can only pair up so much. You can only parallelize before you start to trip over each other. You hit breaking point. So that's what we found about the technology. We thought the technology was going to set us free, but it was not the answer to all our questions. And when people say we want to go faster, very quickly you hit the law of diminishing returns, regardless of the tech that you're using. The second thing we do is we look at the people. And the people that we had, we knew exactly what we were going to find. They were incredibly enthusiastic. They were great team members. They supported each other. They looked after each other. But they were also incredibly enthusiastic. And when I say enthusiastic, they used to dive in to help each other out. They would review people's pull requests. They would look at what was going off. They'd try to test. They'd try to help each other out. But that variability started to make it really difficult to be able to put estimates together to work out how long it's going to take. Because people were moving around so much, you've got 12 nodes in that network, remember. That's a lot of interconnections. At the same time, you've also got a lot of context switching going on. So people aren't getting the opportunity to focus. You're losing maybe around 30% of cognitive capacity by context switching excessively. So what we decided to do was to still try to capture that enthusiasm, but just give people focus. So we took those 12 people and we said, we just want you to work in a box. We just want you to work within these areas for the next 4 to 8 weeks. A transfer window will appear where you can start to move around. But just give us focus for these next 4 to 8 weeks. And the reason why we did this was to provide people with focus, because very quickly we started to see benefits appear. We started to see reduced context switching. Because people had reduced context switching, the team members, the more senior team members, the more veteran team members, stronger software engineers, they had the opportunity to work with that technology more and more. They had an opportunity to deep dive into it. And they also had a chance to start to mentor and coach the more junior members of staff, which was really good. New people that were coming into the organisation, it was great for them as well, because they were given an area to work within, so they could start to learn about the technology and the mechanics of the organisation. It was really good. So what we did was we took that group of people and we went down from 12 nodes in that network to effectively 6. Which is good, which is using theory of constraints principles, which are mechanics, and applying it to people. And we did that for a reason. The second thing we did was we went from 6 down to 3. So we started to do really aggressive paired working. And when I say paired working, I don't mean paired programming. I mean people in different professions working together. And the reason why we did this was we wanted to build resilience in the team as fast as possible. So paired working is fantastic. It does 2 things really, really well. The first thing that it does is it now enables us to shift where quality takes place. Quality, in the old way of working, where testing is left till the end, is post-process. Paired working shifts that. It moves it to being in process, which is great. It bakes in quality to what we're doing. At the same time, what it also does, it also bakes in handover and transfer, because we all know what happens when we come to the end of something. We say, yeah, we're going to hand over to somebody else. And we're going to put all of that stuff together in our knowledge base. It never happens. And God forbid somebody goes under a bus. What we want to do is we want to build resilience. So what we did was we did paired working again and again and again. And it started to work for us. And we started to rotate people between these different work streams, maybe every 8 weeks, and it started to work well. And what we started to see was improvements in our numbers. So this is a funky graph that shows the amount of throughput in terms of complexity. The blue one is the commodity work, the white one is the bespoke work, and as you can see, we've got loads of variability. That one's there, that one's down, that one's up all over the show, and then it's suddenly down again. What we started to do was after about 4 time boxes or 8 weeks, we started to see some stability coming through. We very quickly started to see stability and predictability. So we could go back to our product owner and we could go back to the wider business and we could say things like this with a degree of confidence. We think it's going to take between X and Y. And what that enabled us to do was to then shift our conversation and improve the quality of that conversation. Before, when I first talked to you about that backlog, it was all about priority. Now we can change that. We can talk about value because we've got the missing time component. We've got the missing part of the equation, which is a really good place to get to. So we as an organisation can make better investment decisions on what is the highest value thing to do next. So where do we go from there? Well, looking at those metrics we started to capture right back at the beginning, which ones did we expose? Well, we cared about paired working, so we started to talk more about defects and incidents because that's about quality. We were interested in the staffing of these different work streams, so we started to look at team capacity, and we're interested in stability and forecasting and throughput. So we started to look at the complexity and we started to expose these to the team. This was a really good place to start, but it was the starting point because this was all about the Shuhari learning cycle. And back then we were well into the Shu phase of this learning cycle. Is everybody aware of Shuhari? So Samar, a quick intro then. Shuhari comes from martial arts. It's about continuous learning and improvement. It's made up of 3 stages. Shu is all about following rules exactly and precisely to build discipline. Ha is all about understanding the physics of what's going on, the interconnectedness between things, and understanding why X equals Y. And then you start to bend those rules. And then finally, Re is all about redefining the ways that you're working to create far more sublime ways of working to achieve the same output, if not better. But we were in the first step of that Shuhari cycle. But we were starting to make progress. But sadly, I was failing as an Agile coach because I was treating people like resources. I was using theory of constraints, which is the mechanical concept, and applying that to people. People are not resources. And even though we were doing things like paired working, and we had these work streams, and we had stability, we started to get complaints. And people started to murmur, and they started to say things like this: I feel like I'm not doing anything. And they come to me and they say, Tom, what have I delivered today? And we started to investigate why this was, and we started to understand this. And what we found was this, that some people in the team, even though we put these better things in place to reduce the amount of stress and hopefully elevate psychological safety with the rules and values, we're starting to see increases in stress within our team, which was not a good place to get to. So what we did is we zoomed in to understand how people were measuring out at themselves. Why were people feeling a bit distressed? Well, this is what we found. We found that even though we've got a fantastic engineering culture at Sky Betting and Gaming based around engineering excellence, it's very much about the singular. It's very much about I. It's always about, this is what I did today, this is what I did yesterday, and then this is what I'm going to do tomorrow, and this is what I'm going to learn tomorrow. So what we started to do, we started to reframe that for people, to shift where people saw value coming from. Before, it was all about me. We want to get people to see value coming from we. So we started to coach this to people time and time again. We wanted to shift people's concept of where value came from individual creation to co-creation with their colleagues. And encourage people to see that just because I'm not cutting a line of code doesn't mean I'm not adding value. The sheer act of listening to somebody, being that person that you can bounce ideas off, that is just as powerful because you're shaping a thought process. And we started to enforce this within the team, reinforce it, and it started to bed in. And it was really good to see. And you could start to see the collaboration between the team change, all for the better. But then after about 3 months, the team came back to me and they said, Tom, enough. And they'd had enough. Because we'd done loads in the time and they'd hit saturation point. But it was a good thing to see because the team was confident enough to be able to say that. They were able to come back to me with one voice, which was good. So what we decided to do was to shift our focus, change the gear, and to just kind of like crystallize the work that we've been doing. Now, we are a Kanban team. We're a Kanban team. It works for us based on the number of incidents that we get and based on how work arrives to us. We want that continuous flow. And in Kanban, we talk about making the implicit explicit, visualizing things, aggressively visualizing things so we can see what's going off. It's a visualization system after all, Kanban. So we started to visualize things. And we started to visualize things, like most things, we took it to the nth degree. And we started to visualize anything. If it moved, if you worked on it, if you got involved in it, somebody would visualize it. And we started to capture everything. And that's not just the software, that's everything that's going through our board, everything that we're working on. So not just the software, we're talking about pen tests, we're talking about meetings and events, comms plans, you name it. All these things got visualized on our board, so you could see everything that was taking place, not just the work of the engineers, but product, delivery. Everybody's work was suddenly visualized for the first time. Then we decided to visualize the things that didn't move. So we visualized our policies, our pipelines, our constraints, you name it, we would visualize it. And the reason why we did this relentlessly was to bring everything to the surface. The obvious blockages, the obvious impediments, and the far more subtle ones, to find out where those kinks were in our delivery pipeline. Now, we've got a team of 12 people, and it's pretty heavily weighted towards software engineers. Maybe around 6 to 7 software engineers. You've got 1 business analyst over here and 2 testers over here. Can you guess where the constraints and bottlenecks are? Absolutely, analysis and test. But we weren't able to get any new people. We were told we need to find a way to go faster because we had these big deadlines that we have to meet. So what we decided to do was to take a leaf out of Scrum's book. Because even though that we're a Kanban team, it doesn't mean we can't learn from Scrum. Scrum's another great framework, and usually on LinkedIn I see these types of things. Scrum versus Kanban. It's a zero-sum game. Nobody's going to win in that battle, and it's not a fight that I would ever pay to see. But there's things that we can learn from Scrum because Scrum's incredibly powerful. In fact, one of the best things that Scrum did was it changed the way that we saw teams. Previously, teams were about software engineers. And what Scrum did was it changed the language. It created the concept of a product team, of a development team, but a product development team. Not a team of engineers, not a team of BAs, not a team of testers, but a team that are dedicated towards getting the product out of the door. The true measure of success is not about being the best BA that you can be. The true measure of success is the product that you create and you work together. So what we started to do was to re-emphasize this language with our team and really push that boundary. And we started to say to people, don't bring your titles to the team, bring yourself, bring your personality, bring your skills. But to be fair, you're going to be getting involved in everything because the real measure of success is working together to get a product out of the door, to create a service for our customers. That's the measure. So we started to emphasize this with our team. We reminded people of it time and time again. And when we started to experience challenges where we've got blockages in analysis and we've got blockages over in test over there, we encouraged people to move around, and they did. Our software engineers got up and they went to the areas of those blockages. And what it enabled us to do through theory of constraints was start to alleviate those blockages, to maximize our throughput. But it was good for us in different reasons. Yes, we got more throughput with the same number of people. So we started to pick up our throughput as a team in terms of complexity. But what it also did was it enabled us to become far better engineers. It enabled us to become a more resilient team, a more T-shaped team. But we also became more empathetic. We had more empathy for each other, I should say. Because if you're a software engineer and you're walking in a business analyst's shoes and you're living the life of a tester, you are going to understand why they care so much about that piece of gherkin, yeah? You're going to understand why is a tester so obsessed with our test environment being up and things being in a state where we can test things consistently. So what we did is we built this into our values because we cared about it so much. We reminded people of it wherever we went, whether it was in the real world or it was in Slack. Retros, stand-ups, you name it, we started to remind people of this. Always take a friend with you wherever you go. Pair up wherever possible, because this is about building that resilience. So when we encountered situations where our test environment went down, it used to be the case that our testers panicked and everybody looked at the testers. Now, everybody panics because it's everybody's pipeline to maintain. It's everybody's job to maintain that service and keep it operating. It's about sharing our understanding of who owns things. So what metrics helped us out here? Well, the metrics that we cared about were these ones here. So we've got WIP levels and technical debt. Technical debt because we want to explain why things break and why things cause us problems, because we want to improve that. We can expose that through empathy by working more closely with our product owner. And we can do the same thing with WIP levels. By visualizing those things relentlessly, we can see where the blockages and the kinks are, and we can do something about it. So we put these changes in place, we visualized things, and we started to look at the impact this was having to our team in terms of metrics. And these are the things that we saw. We saw by moving people around, by alleviating those constraints, we got a 30% increase in throughput without adding a single other person to the team, which was good. Because we were visualizing work more, it turned out that we were actually doing around 230% extra work. That's 230% of things that are not being tracked on the board. So we started to visualize that so we could see what was going on. And then what we also started to see was that by working together, by building those stronger relationships, we saw a 30% reduction in defects because we were shifting where quality was taking place. But then my boss came to me and says, Tom, these sound fantastic metrics, but sorry, dude, your cycle time's up. Before it was 5, now it's 7. And I said, don't worry, it was always 7, we just didn't know it. Because it always was 7, but now we're visualising it, we can now do something about it. It's the right place to start from. But this is about us starting to edge into the second phase of the shoe hire recycle. We started to understand the physics, the interconnectedness between things, how one thing equals another. And what we're also starting to do is to bend rules as well. Because those metrics that I've shown you there, they look fantastic, but I'm afraid they are vanity metrics. They don't amount to anything. Okay? What we found though is this. We found that the real metrics are not those things that are living on the surface, the tip of the iceberg. The real metrics are the things that are going off underneath in that team. It's the drive, the interactions, the way people are working, how people are motivated. That's the engine room. If we want things to go faster, that's the engine that we need to feed. The metrics will not do anything. The team will do something, and that's what the team is all about. So we decided to start to pay attention to this, and we started to look at how are people interacting. And what we found is that these interactions were actually coming from those values and those rules that we'd established, from our psychological safety and our team's culture. So we started to pay attention to them, and we started to say, okay, well, if these are the things that we believe, how are these things driving our behaviours? And what we started to recognise was that these were the real metrics that were driving our team, not the vanity metrics, not the expressions of what's going off on the surface. Another thing that we found, which was really interesting, was that originally we started off as LARS, the Login and Registration Squad. But very, very quickly, our culture started to separate us away from our technology and the products we were supporting. Very quickly we realised that LARS was no longer about the products. LARS was actually a culture. It was a mindset, it was a different way of working. Different from what was going off around us, which was really good to see. But if this is the engine room, let's measure it. If this is the real metric, let's follow it. So we started to do that, and we started to capture health and values. We started to do a very, very basic version of a Spotify health check. And using those values, every week we would ask the team, how do you feel about things, to understand sentiment. Are people positive? Or are people negative? What's going off? What's the trend? And this is what we captured. We looked at things and we asked the question, do you feel focused? Do we have business awareness? Is the work the right size? Do you feel that your voice is heard? Okay? Are you listening and collaborating with your colleagues appropriately? And we started to capture this information, so we graphed it. And we started to see the peaks and the troughs, and we started to see the trends. We decided to follow these things. And what this did was it started to show us that these things here were weather vanes. They would show us trouble before it started to show up in those superficial metrics. Weeks before, a couple of weeks before, a good couple of weeks actually. So we started to pay attention to it. And using this information, we started to change the way that we were talking to people, change the language, the quality of our conversation, target our coaching. It became more focused around the data that we were using, because what we were doing here was we were effectively going through that whole cycle again. It was about going back to basics, transparency, inspection, adaptation. And as well as showing our team during our retrospectives, what is our throughput, what's the breakdown of work, what is the complexity that we're getting through, we also started to say, okay, how do you think it's gone? Why do you think you feel this way? What key events have contributed to us feeling really low, or what's brought us up to a high? And we started to use that, to use empathy as a form of data-driven retrospective, which was a really good place to get to. So, how do you make all of this stick? Well, they say in order to make things stick, you need to spend around 10,000 hours doing something to build a habit. What we found is that naturally people would slide back into previous ways of working because people have a modus operandi. And what we've got to do is build a habit and a different way of working. So we started to do that. So to do that, we need to exercise our pipeline. To do that time and time again, to build that skill and that habit. So we needed to exercise it. So we created a load of user stories to run things through the pipeline and keep running them through the pipeline. The problem is though, we could not artificially say we're going to take on more work because we've got a finite number of people in the team. So we decided to pump up the user stories by sashimi slicing them. Not salami slicing stories, but making them insanely thin. And the metric that we used to follow this was the number of raw product backlog items. So over a 2-week period, we started to slice our stories stupidly thin. In fact, we pumped up the volume by around 40%. That's artificially though. But the reason why we did this is that we wanted to build muscle memory. The more times we work user stories, the more times we work things through our pipeline, the better our muscle memory is going to get, the better our discipline is going to get. At the same time though, if we do something and it's painful once or twice a day, we will soon forget about it. If you do something 10 times a day, 20 times a day, 30 times a day, that pain is going to become acute and you will do something about that pain. And that's what we started to do. We started to knock all of the kinks out of our pipeline, to build discipline, identify the pain, and to build that muscle memory. But to do that, we ended up having to break one of those rules. I talked to you about the shoe hire recycle. What we did now was we broke one rule. We went to invest. We say that a good user story is independent, negotiable, valuable, estimatable, sizable, and testable. We decided to knock the I off that. User stories were no longer independent. What we ended up doing was you ended up actually taking a story as it entered our pipeline, splitting it, sometimes unnecessarily, and moving it through the pipeline and then reassembling it on the other end. It created a little bit of overhead. But what it enabled us to do was it enabled us to refocus what we were doing, because here we are redefining the way of working. We're breaking rules, and we're not afraid to break rules because the goal is to exercise that pipeline, to build discipline, to make it stick. So after a couple of months of this madness, what we then started to do was to assemble things back together. We didn't split things to the degree that we used to, but we started to see the benefits. And these were the benefits we saw. Cycle time went down to 2 days, which was pretty cool. So we started to get things out the door faster, and we went back to using invest, which was even better. So where'd you go from here then? Well, we don't settle. We've focused on the team, we've built this high-performing Agile team, we're achieving our goals, but actually, you don't settle. Because how many of you, let's have a quick show of hands, feels like this is going off in your place? Come on, don't be shy. Okay, sometimes you feel like the organisation is the impediment because a fast-moving Agile team will rub up against the organisation, friction will occur. And they say in a high-performing Agile organisation, that organisation can only move as fast as its slowest moving team. So we decided to look at our value chain. What does it take to take a concept and to turn it into reality? It turned out that some of our ideas didn't originally come from within the bubble of Lars. Some ideas came from the wider Sky Betting and Gaming group. What we found is that work came to Lars from the wider group. It then travelled through service management, and we'll talk about that later. But what happened was these things that were coming to us were really, really big. They were very big in terms of batch size. They were very output focused. It did not give us something that was malleable to work with. It made continuous delivery a bit more difficult. So what we decided to do was to look at the overall value chain. Go back to CALMS. One of the key things of CALMS is lean value thinking, lean systems thinking. We looked at what it took to take an idea and turn it into reality. What are the steps in between? And we decided to help the rest of the organisation to help us. So what we did was we took our Agile boot camps and we extended them. We got through about 100 people through training over a 6-month period. And the reason why we did this was to help people cut work smaller, shift from output to outcome. So that would eventually reach us. And it started to, because the size of the work suddenly started to become a lot smaller. The size got smaller. Things reached us, they were far more malleable, and we could start to work those things, and we could move them into production a lot quicker, which was good for us. It made us feel happier, and for the organisation, we're able to get products to market faster, which was good. But to get the product out to market, sometimes we have to go through service management. And when I talk about service management, I'm talking about ITIL. Anybody still have ITIL in their organisation? Yeah? It's there for a reason. There are some good ideas in there, I kid you not. However, when you go through service management, it sometimes feels like a waterfall. It feels like you've got this fantastic Agile process, you've got this fantastic product team, and it feels like a waterfall that you're going over a stage gate. But we do this thing in Sky Betting and Gaming called an acceptance into service. And what this is it's a meeting of people to understand, are we operationally ready to put that service out there? Have we got all the checks and balances in place? Are we protecting our customer? And it feels like you're going over a waterfall. But it does not behave like a waterfall. It might feel that way, but when you're in the room, it feels like work's blasting out of the ground. Because it turned out that when we were going to these sessions, loads of conversations were missing. Lots of operational considerations were missing. Ops was not a first-class citizen for us. So we decided to make it a first-class citizen. But when we went to these sessions, it turned out that they took nearly 2 hours to do this, to have these conversations. It was just going on forever. It's crazy. But that's because we were missing ops out. So we decided to make it a first-class citizen. We brought all of those things from acceptance into service into our backlog, because that was the true nature of delivering something. We shifted left on that. But then what we also did was we shifted left on our conversations as well. Previously, we would engage with the wider business, probably maybe like 3/4 into a delivery, if it's a big delivery, a new service that we're putting into production. What we decided to do was to shift those conversations left, and we decided to drag them really, really far left, and we started to have these things called war games. So war games is everybody in a delivery team, software engineers, BAs, testers, but then also we're having a bunch of product people in there, risk and responsibility, legal, contact centre, you name it, everybody's in that room. All the people that are necessary to support that service when you put it out there for the first time. And what we do is we lock the doors, like the Agile boot camps, and we throw 20, 30, 40 scenarios into that room, and we see how the organisation deals with it. We see what connections exist, we look at the processes, we see what knowledge deficits we've got, what interactions are taking place. And what this enables us to do is it's a human version of Gherkin. It's like working out all the different scenarios that we're dealing with, and it's about stress testing a concept before we put it into production. It's really useful. It's a bit like picking up an old 486 computer and shaking it to see what bits fall out, and then doing something about it. So we started to do this, and what this showed us was that our services were not just our product and functionality alone. It was about the logging, it was about the monitoring, it was about the metrics, it was about the contact center, security, failover, you name it. All of these things go into putting a service into production. So what we ended up doing was we ended up, by working far more close with operations and the rest of the business, was we ended up actually pulling service management back into Lars. So it became part of what we were doing. We were no longer just about building a product, we were also about operating and optimizing that product when it's out there, which is a good place to get to, very DevOpsy. But the metric for that was the acceptance into service, because previously it took us 2 hours, now it took us 12 minutes to get through that. Because we've got higher quality conversations taking place. We've got a better visualized product backlog. We know what it actually takes to put a piece of software, a product into production. And because we've got that better understanding, everything's shifted left, the acceptance into services in the backlog. What that enables us to do is it enables us to make better investment decisions. We know the true cost of putting something out there to our customers. That's a lot. All of it adds up, because in the last 18 months, we've done a hell of a lot. We've got the happiness index, we've got defect reduction, we've been slicing things, getting really thin. We've got work streams, domain-driven design, you name it, we've done all of those things. But we've done all of these things incrementally. This is about incremental gains. It's about shifting language little by little and nudging people, nudging the way we understand things. Because what it's enabled us to do is it's enabled us to kill this. Because velocity is just an agile vanity metric, like everything else. 1 week velocity is up, the next week velocity is down, and then it's up again. And then we all wonder why, and we all question it. The reality is, what we're after now is we're after stability. That's the real measure. We want sustainable improvement. So, our 2 metrics that we care about now in our squad is this, the health of the squad. How do we feel we're working? Because this is the weather vane. This is the thing that will tell us whether something bad is coming. Not just a week away, but 2 weeks away. If we can get into this at an early stage, we can put things right. We can stop things expressing themselves in those vanity metrics. Then what we did was we started to look at, okay, well, what does performance look like? And performance is not velocity. Performance is stability, controlled improvement. So we started to look at performance corridors. We looked at the last 8 weeks. We collected all of that information that we used, and we said, okay, given the things that have happened before in the last 8 weeks, if things were to remain the same, what can we predict is going to happen next? We created an upper corridor and a lower corridor. So when we start to talk about this isn't gone quite right, as long as we're inside that corridor, we're okay. If we step outside of that corridor, then we can have a conversation about it. But it's a better timed conversation, and we can really drill into that. The quality of the conversation goes up. This is about improvement, constant improvement. And this reminds me of a great Agile quote that I heard maybe about 5 years ago from Dan North, the father of BDD. He said this. He said, Agile is about sustainably reducing the lead time to business impact. And that is exactly what we're doing here. It's about sustainable improvement. So let's sum this up then. Let's go back to those goals. We wanted to be the best login squad ever. And we were, because we were the only login squad. We wanted to be the most agile squad ever. And we were, because it was our own version of agile. But we have a hunger to constantly improve, which is good. And we also wanted to be maximum DevOps, or maximum DevOp. But going through this process, we started to understand what DevOps was. It's a mindset, it's a way of working, it's principles, it's values, it's how we communicate with each other. It's constant knowledge sharing. So we were able to achieve that. But in comms, there's one thing that I didn't mention, and it was automation. Okay? We did a hell of a lot of automation though. We automated our tests where it was appropriate. We automated the health of our service, monitoring, alerting, all of those things, all that logging, all those good things, we automated it, including the deployment. But one of the key pieces of learning that's come from this, for me, over this 18-month period, is this. As an Agile coach, I'm taught to value the things that are in the Agile manifesto. I'm told to value things like people and interactions over processes and tools. But all too often, when you join an organisation, there is a natural itch that you will feel. And that natural itch is to run to Jira and automate your workflows. Create the most fantastic transitions that automate things. But the reality is that the focus is in the wrong place. The focus should be on the team. The workflows do not deliver a high-performing team or a great product. Okay? It's the team. Focus your time and investment on the team because everything will flow from there. Don't automate too early. Don't prematurely automate. Automate at the last responsible moment, just like we talk about having responsibility and handover. Another thing I will say is this, is that our interactions and the behaviours that we've got as a team, the way that we work, those things are just as powerful as technology constraints. They can handcuff us, they can hold us together, and they can constrain us. But the quality of our conversation can set us free. It can be all about a closed down conversation, very insular, very focused on what's next, or it can all be about possibility. Language sets you free. So use that as a dial when you're working with teams. And my final recommendation to you tonight is this. Sounds like a great story, doesn't it? But don't copy us. Because you're not us, you're not Sky Betting and Gaming. You are not Netflix. You're not Amazon. You're not Apple. Those are those companies. The reason why those companies are so successful is because they listen to what's going on and they are not afraid to be themselves. Okay? If you want to be a high-performing Agile team, if you want to build great products, be you. Okay? Just be you. Listen to what's going off. Listen to the noise. Okay? From the noise, filter out the signal. Sense and respond to that. But always, just be you, because when you are you, you will be amazing. And you will build amazing teams. And I'd like to say thank you to my amazing team, Lars, because that was Lars. And that is the end of the show. Thank you.